Mr. President, I rise to speak against the bill that will be coming over from the House very shortly. We have had a chance to look at this bill for the last few hours, and there is much in it that is different from what passed the Senate, and some of it is different from what passed the House as well. And I want to address a few points that have been made on the floor because I think it is somewhat misleading to talk about the Republican input in the way that it is being described. First of all, the bill was written without any Republican input. It was written in the House of Representatives by the Democrats. There were no amendments allowed. The committees were not allowed to exercise their jurisdiction on the bill there. It came to the Senate. I was on the Appropriations Committee, which passed the spending part of the bill. Amendments were discouraged. The meeting lasted a couple of hours. The same thing on the Finance Committee, which was the tax part of the bill. There were no amendments that were able to be hammered out. There was not an amendment process where we gave and took. And to say that Republicans had a chance to have input is really disingenuous. I do respect the President of the United States for coming and talking to Republicans. He talked to the Republican senators. He talked to the Republican House members. And I think that is good. There's nothing bad about that because he is a smart and civilized man that we all respect. And we want the President of the United States to work with Congress as we go forward. But talking is not sitting down and taking ideas and shaping them into something that we could all say we had a part in. If I could support half of this bill, I would be inclined to look at it in a way that maybe I would be able to vote for it. But let's look at what this bill is. It's a total cost of $787 billion. The spending portion is $580 billion. With interest, the cost of this bill is going to be $1 trillion. Now, people say, it's a spending bill. What did you expect, a spending bill? I still take $1 trillion of taxpayer money, borrowing from the future, very seriously. I think we ought to spend some time before we spend $1 trillion in a bill that is going to be off the budget, that it is not in any projected budget that we have seen. It is going to add $1 trillion to the deficit. And is it going to succeed? I hope it does. But let's talk about what is in this bill. 11% of the spending in this bill will occur this year. The purpose of a stimulus bill is to stimulate the economy quick. We are talking about $1 trillion bill, 11% spending this year. In fact, what the CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan arm of Congress that is supposed to give us facts without political bias, has said that most of the money in this bill is going to be spent in years 3 through 10. Well, a stimulus bill should inject into the economy an energy that will cause jobs to be either produced or kept, that will produce spending so that there will be something for people to make and for retailers to sell. And after we have that stimulus, which we hope would be in the private sector and therefore permanent, then we're going to have to deal with the deficit in years 3 through 10 so that we don't get in an upside down situation where we have so much debt that either our foreign investors will not buy our debt, or if they do, the risk is so good that they increase the interest rate, which then becomes an inflationary problem. So this is not a stimulus package when 11% is spent in the first year. 18% of this conference report is dedicated toward tax relief. I believe that tax relief has been proven again and again to spur the economy. President Kennedy gave tax relief, and it spurred the economy and increased revenue. President Reagan, tax relief, it increased revenue. President Bush, 2001, when we were having a rough time in our economy, the first tax cuts, it turned the stock market around, and it gave us the largest increase in revenue in the history of America. So people scoff at tax relief as a part of a stimulus package, and how can they scoff when it has been proven again and again to work? But in this conference report, 18% is in tax relief, and in my opinion, it's not even the tax relief that will spur the economy. The tax relief is the Making Work Pay credit, which is going to be approximately $7.65 per week in tax relief for a worker. Now, that is going to be limited to $400 a worker. Now, speaking of what has been tested, last year, when we became concerned that the economy was beginning to lag, we passed a $600 tax credit. And every economist that I have read says that it did nothing. It did not spur the economy. It did not help our financial situation at all. That was $600 per person last year. This is going to be $400 per person, and it is going to be strung out in such small amounts in a person's paycheck that they're going to mostly not feel that they have enough money left over from their paychecks at $7.65 per week to go out and spend money, which is what you want in a stimulus package. The stimulus provides $1.10 a day in tax relief to workers, while saddling every American family with $9,400 in added debt. The homebuyer credit that the Senate added, which tries to correct the fundamental problem that started this whole economic downturn, housing, is all but eliminated from the conference committee report. We have an $8,000 credit for first-time home buyers. Now, I support this because it will be some credit for a first-time home buyer to go out and buy a home. But the Senate provision was $15,000 for any home buyer. So we had the capability to give every home buyer that $15,000 tax credit so that we would move inventory and allow home builders to start building again, which would create jobs. That was changed in the conference report. The conference drastically reduced the auto purchase deduction, which would have spurred our struggling auto industry and provided relief to dealers all across the country. I have a great sympathy for auto dealers. When we were taking up the automobile manufacturing bailout, I was very concerned about not only the manufacturers, but also the dealers, because the dealers could not help what was happening in the auto manufacturing industry. They had nothing to do with the manufacturing, but the dealers and the families that are supported by dealers were being hit again and again and again because their buyers could not get credit and they could not buy cars. So we should have dealt in this bill with housing and credit. Those are the two things that cost us this financial downturn, and I so hope and hoped that we would deal in this package, the first thing, with housing and credit. And I hope that eventually we will, but it will be $1 trillion later. 17% of this...
Senator, time has expired.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent for an additional 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, 17% of the discretionary spending in this package is for infrastructure items. Now, infrastructure is what we should be spending money on, because infrastructure is jobs. Infrastructure is American jobs. In the bill, we don't have enough in infrastructure spending. So, Mr. President, the Heritage Foundation says that because so much of the money in this bill is being spent in the out years and is not temporary, then the overall cost by the time we finish the effects of this bill is going to be $3.27 trillion. Mr. President, this is not the bill that we should be passing right now. This bill did not even have the signature of one Republican on the conference committee. We don't expect to have dominated the conference committee or the Senate or the House production of a bill. But to have no Republican support cannot, under any circumstances, be declared bipartisan. 3 out of 535, or 3 Republicans out of the Republican contingent, to be honest, is just not bipartisan, Mr. President. It's just not bipartisan. Let me just add a couple of minutes about what we're for, because I am against this bill for the reasons I have stated, but I am for something. I'm for stimulus. We all know we need stimulus. I would like tax cuts that would spur spending, not tax cuts that would be dribbled out in such small amounts that no one would feel they could go out and buy something. Tax cuts that would spur spending would be in the form of a card, like the converter box cards that were sent in the mail, that would be for specific purposes. Maybe it would be home improvements. Maybe it would be weatherization. Specific purposes would require spending, and it would be a card that people would know they could spend, and it would make a difference in jump-starting the economy. Tax cuts that would spur hiring. It was sort of said on the other side that we don't need corporate rate deductions because no one's making a profit. Well, let's do something that would allow corporations to make a profit, because that's when they hire people, is when they're making a profit. How about a tax credit for hiring people? That might make a difference. How about spending on infrastructure? How about more than 17% of $1 trillion going for infrastructure that would be jobs today for people building bridges, building highways, building things that would be clearly job creation? I had an amendment, which never made it to the floor, that said that military construction should be moved up from the Department of Defense 5-year plan to 3 years. Military construction is money that we know we're going to spend. The Department of Defense has a 5-year plan. They know exactly what their priorities are. We normally take it 1 year at a time. Why not take the 5-year plan and bring it up and do it in 2 or 3 years, because we know it would be American jobs. We know it is money that we're going to spend anyway. It would be stimulative, and it would be the right kind of spending. Instead, the conference cut the military spending in this bill from what passed in the Senate. The conference cut our military spending for hospitals and for Veterans Administration hospitals to increase the quality and access to health care for our veterans. Mr. President, What kind of priority is that? And they're increasing spending to save a mouse in San Francisco that might be endangered. Mr. President, this is not a package that we can be proud to give to the American people and say it's worth tightening our belts to do this because it will make a difference. But we can be for something. We don't say we should have everything that we propose. There are other good ideas on the other side. We acknowledge that. But, Mr. President, this is not the right bill for the American people, and I urge my colleagues to please consider their positions and let us do this right. Tax cuts to spur spending. Tax cuts to spur the opportunity for corporations and businesses to hire people. Spending on infrastructure, more in military construction, not less. That would be a bill that we could support, Mr. President. I thank you, and I yield the floor.